We once tested an imaginary, almost absolutely fastest 4-core chip, 4-core 8-thread Zen 3 with 3D cache. It wasn't that bad. However, quite a few games have been released since then, and today we're having a real 4-core 8-thread chip. The entry ticket to the beautiful world of already unsupported LGA 1700 socket. Unsupported, and so what? Its successor tends to be not successful anyway. So it's an i3-14100F, on the cheapest motherboard with DDR4 RAM. Modern budget Intel platform. We are going to compare it with a dead CPU that can't handle most of the modern GPUs, so it's trash and should be only used in office machines for playing solitaire at best, according to internet experts. You know, those people that think that CPU needs to handle a GPU. I doubt we might help them at this point. So yeah, Ryzen 5 3600, a legend that you either love or hate if you're an internet GPU squeezing master. Hello and welcome back to Hardware Lab. R5 3600, a chip straight from 2019. It is a mid-range solution released a year prior to the current gen consoles, PS5 and Series X, and it's not that far from a CPU installed in those machines. Featuring 6 cores based on Zen 2 architecture, it marked a significant improvement over Zen Plus. The design includes two 3-core CCX modules with a single chiplet paired with a separate I/O chiplet. With 6 cores and SMT, it delivers 12 threads, more than what even some modern games can fully utilize. However, its single-core performance, while impressive at launch, falls short by current standards. Despite this, the lack of strong modern budget CPUs has allowed R5 3600 to maintain its position as an excellent budget option for gaming PCs over past 5 years. For sheer bang for buck value, it's still a great choice. Not least due to availability of relatively cheap and good AM4 motherboards. The combo of Ryzen 3600, both new and used, can be bought for around 120 quid, and the upgrade path is quite obvious on this platform. You can easily plug in a 5700X 3D instead of 3600 and you'll be fine. It doesn't consume much more power, while providing 2 extra cores on the bare architecture and with addition of a 3D cache. Although, I would think twice before recommending anyone today buying a platform on 3600. If you're lucky to have one already, you're still able to play most games at fixed 60 with a good RAM, and the upgrade to 5700X 3D is just there waiting for you. By the way, this test uses an emulated 3600, so it's actually a 3900X with one CCD disabled. It's the exact copy of 3600, so it's not going to affect the performance in any way. The i3-14100F, on the other hand, despite costing relatively the same price new, and for some reason more expensive used, requires an expensive motherboard, even if you go with the cheapest supported option, H610 chipset with DDR4. This kind of board will limit your potential upgrades significantly. I'm not quite sure if there are any at all, like I would be scared to plug 125W i5 into this board, with the only option to increase RAM speed and decrease latency by lowering the memory timings. Can you go with a bare board that allows RAM overclocking? Sure, just pay over 100 quid for an H670 or B650 board. And then that system would end up as a competitor to a Ryzen 5500 or 5600 at least, so not today. We got the absolute cheapest board on H610. The CPU itself only features 4 cores and 8 threads, although these cores are definitely faster than Ryzen ones and probably one of the fastest 4 cores you can get. The 4-8 configuration though is still concerning, no matter how fast your cores are, especially if you test with background tasks, but more on that later. Both systems will be using a pretty good Patriot Viper RAM kit, two 8GB modules running on 3600 MHz CL14-14-1434 on Ryzen and 3200 MHz CL13-14-1434 on i3. Ryzen will be overclocked to fixed 4.3 GHz, and i3 will work on stock 4.5 GHz turbo boost. I've tried to lock it to the maximum available 4.7, but it didn't work. The GPU for the test is a Radeon RX 7800 XT. All the tests were captured via Elgato 4KX capture card on M1 MacBook, so the recording doesn't affect the result. CS2 runs slightly faster on i3 14100F in terms of average FPS, despite the system using way slower RAM and featuring less cores. However, 3600 is more stable and consistent with fewer frametime spikes. Not saying that anyone would feel the difference between the platforms in this game, but lower 0.1 lows on i3 is not a good sign for future testing. Another easy to run competitive games with excellent performance on both systems, aside from one particular moment in the benchmark. This explosion results in a frametime spike on both CPUs, however i3 handles it much smoother throughout multiple runs. Probably when the explosion occurs, the amount of calculations on a single core increases dramatically at a single moment, but i3 recovers from this drop easier due to a better single core performance, resulting in a much better 0.1 lows. Talos Principle 2 was tested with ultra reflections and high GI, unlike in the previous tests. Turns out they decrease the CPU performance dramatically due to an enormous increase in geometry in reflections and lighting. At first glance, i3 is doing a better job here, but despite not being fully utilized, it provides more frametime spikes, resulting in a similar 0.1 lows with Ryzen. Stalker 2 is a really CPU demanding game. It was tested in the Rostock base, and any bigger bases or towns tend to be much heavier than the rest of the game, so outside of them both CPUs offer a relatively smooth 40 to 60 FPS experience. Ryzen 3600 can even do that on epic settings, not sure about i3 though. However, although i3 is slightly faster in terms of average frame rate, it is less consistent and lower 0.1 lows reflects that. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 appears to be an extremely optimized game with the FPS and range of 130 to 800 on Ryzen 5 3600. In the core gameplay section, although I highly doubt that Rochester Airport looks like this and all the stuff have missing textures in real life. Seriously though, I tried to run the game at least 20 times and got like one semi-successful launch. All that after long installation hell. Just wanted to complain how bad it is. Probably the worst game launch I've seen so far. I was attempting to test the game on the release date and a day after, so maybe it's a bit better now. But seriously, I don't want to go through all that headache. Please, people studying for game dev, don't skip your lectures. Wukong is a generally light game on CPU and it runs extremely well on both low-end systems. However, better starts of 0.1 lows on Ryzen machine throughout multiple runs is still worth mentioning. Since it turned out lumen reflections and lighting actually affects the performance a lot in Talos Principle, maybe next time testing these games we should figure out more CPU heavy settings. None of the systems is noticeably better than the other in Assassin's Creed Mirage, and considering how heavy the game is in terms of CPU performance, both CPUs are doing an incredible job, above expectations, managing stable 60 in the city. Ryzen is a bit more stable in terms of frame time again, so if we try to decide a winner it will probably be 3600, but it's nothing meaningful in this case. For some reason we got a lower result in this test on Ryzen 5 3600 than in some previous benchmarks on the same settings. I don't know what exactly affected the performance, AMD driver version, game version or whatever else, and I also have no idea whether i3 was affected or not, but currently on the latest Windows game and driver version, it's faster in terms of average FPS but less stable in terms of frame time consistency. Starfield runs better on Core i3. I didn't expect that to be the case because the game is quite good at utilizing 6 or even more cores, but yeah, i3 just doesn't drop under 60 in the center of New Atlantis, and 3600 does. A port of an ancient game with so little changes that Rockstar themselves were afraid even to call it a remaster, but still decided to put a $50 price tag. And they didn't even bother implementing DirectX 12 properly, so the multi-threading utilization is just awful. Yeah, this is the game from 2010 that requires the hardware from 2019, but you know, it's optimized, right? It runs on your wonderful GTX 1660, so this is the real game from when everything was optimized, unlike awful Unreal Engine 5, right? You want better graphics? Nah, it won't run on 1660, so unoptimized by default. Yeah, i3 is faster here, cause this Frankenstein only cares about a single core performance. Spider-Man Miles Morales was tested with an object range 8 for reflections, so this game at these settings pushes both of the CPUs to the limits they are capable of, and Ryzen 3600 is doing a significantly better job here. i3 just has some stars here and there, and the control feels less responsive. However, I was expecting much worse result from a 4-core CPU on these settings. Overall, there are games where Core i3 14100F can be a faster than a good old 3600. In terms of average FPS, it was faster in every single game tested. However, this is not enough to be considered a better gaming CPU, and multiple different games showed a more stable and consistent frame time distribution on Ryzen. The difference between 0.1 lows and average frame rate tends to be way smaller on old 6-core chip, which means most of the games will feel noticeably smoother despite delivering less FPS. Moreover, an old man has one more ace in the hole, aside from the obvious upgrade path and consistent frame times: the multitasking ability that is usually overlooked. You see, in a lot of games, i3 works at the limit to deliver a somewhat consistent frame time, while Ryzen usually has some available resources while running the game. You can view it from multiple angles and think that with Intel, you're at least getting all the performance you paid for, which is weird because it's more expensive, but it is still a fact that Ryzen's resources can be utilized elsewhere. Do you usually chill with friends in Discord and stream them a game while playing? Maybe you have some Chrome tabs or a YouTube video playing on the background. Or maybe you're using an AMD replay recorder feature to instantly save some funniest moments from the game you're playing. Well, all that are background tasks, so we decided to test how it will affect the performance of both systems. So this test was done with Google Chrome open on the second screen, playing a YouTube video. It also had two other tabs open, Google Maps and Reddit. Plus, the system was streaming in Discord to a voice channel, and AMD's instant replays were enabled. Both systems are not doing that great in CS2 with background tasks, but i3 is just much worse. Obvious starters can be really annoying. On Ryzen, they are at least way less frequent. Surprisingly, Talos Principle 2 wasn't all that annoying to play with background tasks on any of the systems. The performance and frame time stability reduction is obviously there, but not as bad as I expected, especially on i3. The advantage of i3 in Starfield disappeared when we launched background tasks. Both systems are far from perfect in this test, but i3 tends to stutter more noticeably despite delivering slightly higher frame rate. Spider-Man was really annoying to play on 4-core CPU with the background tasks. Freezes and stutters happen quite often, and they are really noticeable. The game just screams, please reduce the settings. Ryzen has no such issues. Ryzen 3600, 5 years after it was released as a mid-range option, still shines in a large variety of use cases. It provides reasonable gaming performance for an affordable price with a clear upgrade path and can still compete and even deliver a better gaming experience than a modern budget CPU from Intel. And i3-14100F is not a star in the sky. It can be an alright CPU for an unpretentious gamer that allows flexing with your very high FPS in Counter-Strike benchmarks at peak. It runs games pretty fine, and that's about what you expect from a budget system. The problem is, it's not so budget and artificially limited on a H610 board for no technical reason. That's it for this test. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, pressing the like button and checking similar hard roll-up content. And as usual, stay up to date with HL.